All right, there it goes.
All right. We are 3 minutes after. I say let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here for our first Power BI and Fabric user group meeting of 2024. There have been so many updates and advancements between Power BI and Fabric, and I'm really excited to share some of those with you today. Brent, our fearless leader, is going to present today on a few of those updates. So please keep an ear open, listen in for what he has to say. And then if you have any ideas or topics that maybe you either would love to present on and have that expertise in, or are seeking additional resources and support on and would love to see presented, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will add them to our backlog and see how to get you the most relatable content. With no further ado, Brent, take it away.
Thanks, Taguma, and thanks very much. It's great to see all of you. Thanks for being here today. Yeah, we're going to, like Taguma said, there are so many new features, including a couple we're going to feature or highlight: the DAX Query View in Power BI, which is in preview, and also some of the new info functions is where we'll really spend a lot of our time. But we also will, since it has been a couple of months, our last meeting was in October, there's been a lot of new features, especially in November. And we'll talk about a lot of those and kind of link over to some of the blog articles for you all to check out. So yeah, just to review our purpose, we are here to learn and build relationships with each other, become more skilled at our jobs, deepen our understanding, and hopefully solve problems together. So if you do have a particular problem that you need help with, I would certainly encourage you to ask this group. You could put it in the chat here today. You could also, after we get our agenda passed, you could also go to our official community site. This is obviously a shorthand domain to keep things simple. It's called okpug.org. And I'll just, if I can, I'll go ahead and visit this site and put that link in the chat, or maybe someone could put that in the chat for me there. But this actually is just a shorthand. It will take you to the official community site, which they're now calling Fabric Community. So they really have kind of been rebranding. And I'm sure I'm like way out of date with these slides. But I know that most of us are working in Power BI every day, although we're trying to learn more about Fabric. So I've been keeping things pretty Power BI themed. However, we certainly can talk a little more about Fabric here in just a second. So we also use a meetup site. I do want to let you know that it's on the community site that I'm going to post the slides and PDFs and where our board is. So the meetup there's not much content on Meetup except just meetings, but it's a lot of people are there. So it's a great way to also sort of spread awareness about the meeting as well. And then afterward, this is our YouTube channel. I need to get a alias for this apparently, but you can certainly, our handle is Oklahoma Power BI User Group on YouTube, and you can find it there. Our past meetings will be recorded. It usually does take me a couple of days to kind of get everything done with the video processing. And there's a little bit of editing to do. And so honestly, I'm sure we'll probably find ways of speeding that up this year of getting those posted, but they are there for review within a few business days. How about that? Yeah, so along the lines of things that are kind of upcoming, actually, let me skip. I'll come back to these here in a second. I just wanted to mention, I should have put these first. There are some events coming up. In March, middle of March, they announced, I believe 2 weeks ago, that they'll have the first ever Fabric Community Conference. This will be in March in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand. And the website for that is fabricconf.com. If you'd like to register, I should have also put, and if you go to this site, they have this discount code everywhere. Here, there is a discount code called this MSCUST, that if you wish to use that, it's $100 off of the enrollment fee. I am planning on being here this year. I think it'll be very a lot of good learning opportunities and a pretty active hub for the Fabric and Power BI community. Besides that, also they asked us to share. Didn't really mean to animate this. They asked us to share this learning opportunity. It actually kicked off a couple of days ago. But if you are they have basically a new certification called DP 600, so data platform, and it's a Microsoft Fabric Analytics Engineer certification. So if you're interested, like I'd like to get to learn a lot more about Fabric, this is a pretty good way to follow along with like live events. They kind of mentioned they're going to be walking through all the modules with over 9 episodes. And basically every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's quite a bit of time commitment. But I'm sure by following this website, you could also watch the recordings on demand and kind of get a walkthrough. And then they also offered a discount on the actual exam fee if you just kind of follow this link and finish all the modules. So it's kind of cool. Great chance to learn. And if you're hoping to get okay, cool. Thank you. I didn't. Thanks, Tony. Tony finished it this month. That's awesome. So they are working on a lot of different things on Fabric. I mean, and just in case, if you are coming to the group and you're like, I've heard Fabric, I've heard people talking about it. Obviously, some designs have changed in Power BI. I still don't know if I understand what it is. I think it's fair to just think of it as a superset of Power BI that has a lot more to do with the data platform. So it's adding a lot more capabilities around the data platform. How it works or how you experience it feels a lot like Power BI Premium if you're used to that. So it's actually creating other options of ways of licensing things. And so it kind of brings all the other data stuff and they're trying to bring it all under one big tent, I guess. And looks like people are already all over it. So that's cool. Yeah, learning opportunities for the group. So while we're on this topic of Fabric, I'd love to hear if I can just open the floor for a second. Who's into Fabric? Is anybody way deep into it? And what's your general interest level in learning more? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute if you'd like to about Fabric and the data platform side of stuff. All right. Oh, go ahead, Tony. Your hand's up.
I also wanted to offer too that I'm in contact with a Microsoft specialist out of St. Louis, and he said the Microsoft Technology Center in Dallas is offering, I don't know if it's like education credits or anyways, look into it with your company and find out how you can schedule some one-on-one time with their architects down there who will walk you through from a strategic planning perspective how to implement Fabric within your current environment. So I'm trying to figure out, yes, it's one thing to use it. It's a whole other thing to strategize on implementation of it. So I wanted to give that as an offering too, is if you're willing to get down to Dallas, it sounds like they're Microsoft's throwing everything they can at this to educate people and architect it out.
Yeah, this is perhaps a bit of an opportune time. So anytime a big tech company takes an initiative like this, it's obviously a big risk. They're putting a lot of investment into this, and strategically they want it to go well. And so they would love for you to take advantage of these learning resources, and obviously long-term want to get adoption in the enterprise space. Seeing success levels akin to what Power BI has been, and I'm sure that is part of why they sort of brought all those things to Power BI. They're like, here's been an extremely successful product, so can live in the glow of Power BI as well. But yes, Luke, you made an observation here in chat. Thank you. Kind of like, yes, absolutely. It is Microsoft's move to play in the same space as Snowflake and Databricks are playing in. Absolutely. There's going to be there's going to be a big scrum right there, and that where all those people meet and compete for enterprise data customers. And thanks, Lisa, for your notes on that your company's rolling that out. So that's helpful to know. Okay, great. Thanks. Well, that gives me a pretty good sense. That's about what I thought I might hear. If lots of people have been chiming in like, oh, we're all doing Fabric. It is new. Companies are trying to figure out where it fits and why this option over that option, things like that. But I'm going to kind of reshare my screen here so we can look at the new features together. I'm just going to share my whole screen, make this a bit easier. So yeah, for November, it was a very busy month that of feature releases. So number one, our data sets are now renamed to semantic models. You've probably noticed by now. I didn't know that was going to happen. It just kind of happened one day, and it's purely a naming change. Doesn't necessarily represent any specific new functionality. Just that now they really are semantic models, and so they can contain data, but they may not contain data. So it's more of a mouthful, but it probably is a more accurate description. Something to keep in mind. I'm going to click on these links here to look at our button slicer and data labels. So these features are in preview, so you do have to kind of turn them on. But I was excited to see where they're heading with changing up the slicer visual. It hasn't really changed in quite a while. When you turn that preview feature on, and after this feature GAs, as they say, so basically becomes available for everybody, the slicer is going to look like this, and it looks like the old slicer visual, but it has a lightning bolt on it, which is cool. You can see you have a lot more options. You're just going to have a ton more visual options, and you can read all those, but the picture is going to say it best. Of like, you can start to build more like what I would call kind of chiclet slicers, or you can add more elements into your slicers. So you're going to be able to have a bunch more customization, which will be nice. So definitely, you might want to turn that on and start playing with it. It certainly, I like the direction they're headed. I think it'll be more interactive. And I'll just keep scrolling down too to talk about these reference labels. So I think this is specific to cards, the card visual. For a long time, it's been pretty fixed, like the slicer thing. It's like, yeah, you can do a card, you can add the descriptor, the category label at the bottom, but you also were pretty limited on, how much you could show with that. Unless you pretty much, besides that, we kind of had to turn to what they were calling the smart narrative, or basically the super duper text box, if we wanted to show some other stuff in other formats. Now with these reference labels, it looks like you can get more creative with icons, with some of the text. And I think there was an even better, a better screenshot down here. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's a cool looking card kind of stack there with reference labels. So I haven't personally tried these out yet, but I did want to make sure to point them out because I think they're good. They seem like positive features for people who make reports and want to make them look good. So again, they're in preview. You got to turn them on in that options panel, but might want to start playing with them, see how they do. Nice. So those are two I wanted to highlight for sure. The narrative visual with Copilot, so not too surprising. Their Copilot is, in case you haven't heard, Microsoft's sort of implementation of the LLMs of AI, generative AI. There you go. Let's call it that. Microsoft's implementation of generative AI. It's a whole interesting podcast I could certainly recommend about their relationship with OpenAI and kind of how they license the technology. But essentially, you're going to see more generative AI baked into all of their products. I was trying to do a Power Automate yesterday, and it was like pushing it like a sales hawker or something, trying to like get me to use the Copilot over there on the right-hand side. But you can use it to generate a narrative now. So to see, like, you can even tell it things like focus only on this visual, or make it bullet points, or make it longer. So something you might want to play with, see what it comes up with, and definitely check what it creates because you never know what it'll shoot out there. And I thought this feature was cool too. You can show, they have this neat way, like up here in the upper right-hand side now, you can just say, hey, I want to take all these visuals and show them as tables. So that could be helpful for some folks. Don't read charts as well. It's kind of an accessibility thing. Some folks just prefer, they just give me the rows and columns. I just read that better. And so you can hit that as well on reports, and it will take certain visuals and turn them into tables. It doesn't apply to all visuals. And again, it's a preview feature. So, but it keeps that cross filtering capability. Unlike, you can do one visual as a table now, but it's kind of limited in what it does. That's kind of cool. All right. Anything else from November? There was a lot. So this one I highlighted, but this is what our presentation is going to be about. So not going to click into that just yet. December and January, the Power BI team slows a little bit down, especially January. That's kind of finally when they don't do a release in January. So don't feel like you're missing it if you don't see it this month. They released this a new kind of explore this data type of experience. So if you've been on the semantic model homepage in Power BI, you've probably seen a new experience there where you can kind of explore the tables and things like that. Let's do that for this particular semantic model, where you could say like, okay, give me this table preview, and you can even see the query for it, which is cool. We're going to be looking at more DAX queries like this later on. That's nice. And so they are adding more to this Explore experience. So I don't think I've turned that on in my tenant yet. So actually, I'm sorry, it's right here. There you go. Kind of just a way, without having to pop open a whole new report, to give a real lightweight, like drag and drop this. Go ahead and, okay, show me the circuit country. There we go. And so it's just a nice, rather than having to say, hey, I want to commit to making a whole new report on this, just give me a quick matrix view. I just want to see what's in this table. So pretty cool. A lot of new stuff hiding out everywhere if you know where to look. And I really liked some of these new formatting options for column charts, bar charts, and data labels. Okay, yeah. So like just some examples of things that we're going to be able to do soon. I'm sure most of you have been in a situation, if you had a particular customer or someone who was helping you design a report and wanted it to look just a certain way. Can we overlap these bars? Can we put things side by side? And there'll still be limitations, but as the functionality progresses, those limitations will hopefully become fewer. You can get more control over transparency, more border customization. So if you've been waiting on like, I just need more customization on my bar charts and column charts, you might want to go check out what this can do from the December release. And then I really like these data labels, similar to what they're doing with the column reference. I think they're catching up on, kind of making it look pretty on aesthetics, which has always been a little bit of a second consideration with Power BI. And that looks really good to me. Pretty readable. All right, nice. Oh yeah, Data Activator. I said next meeting. Now I don't know. I've been playing with Data Activator and then I broke it, and so maybe it'll be our next meeting. I think it should. I'll say future meeting for sure. So they have this concept that you can click like inside of a chart, be able to say, I want to set alerts for this chart on a report, and yeah, I'm gonna make sure to put a link to a Data Activator YouTube video in our video. Data Activator. And so, yeah, future meeting. It looks like a really cool feature. It does require Fabric. And then there's info functions. So we're going to talk about these today. They're very helpful. All right. Now there's fewer here in January, but they're giving away, like on the service, you can do more model editing and do more model exploration. So you don't necessarily have to only use the Fit Client Power BI desktop. I mean, just so in case anybody's not aware, that's kind of a roadmap thing for Microsoft that's on there. They've talked about it being in their vision that really like Power BI desktop will be a power tool, but that you'll be able to have a lot more rich experience in browser with Power BI models in the future. So, and then this was a good one. I bet some of you have been waiting on this when you've had to tell your customers like, no, can't do that. Back in the SQL Server reporting services days, you used to be able to do a lot of dynamic, or they would call them data-driven subscriptions. It looks like they're heading that way with Power BI. It does mention you need to get either premium capacity or a Fabric preview trial, which have been easy to get, or a Fabric capacity, which can be less expensive than a premium capacity. So certainly trying to draw people over to the Fabric side, but I have not played with this also, but I like the look of it. Being able to do dynamic, changing the screenshot that each subscription recipient gets. That was just announced this month, so we'll see where that goes. I think that's all I had there. Okay, any other new features? I mean, obviously, meeting every 3 months, we can miss a lot there, and we'll try to get back on our monthly routine starting this year. Any other features or things people are playing with or excited about they want to share? All right, cool. Well, I always want, as part of our goal as leaders, for this to always be very valuable time for you. And I know you can go out and read the blogs, and you can watch the YouTube videos too if you've got the time. But since you're here, I want to give you just like, hey, I came to the meeting, and in 20 minutes, I got caught up on, some of the big things going on with Power BI lately. So you don't have to go and do all that on your own time. Let's deep dive into the DAX Query View in Power BI. So this, just to make sure we kind of do some definitions first, it will help us understand and kind of see the value in what this can bring to us. I'm excited about this feature. As I worked with it, I kind of realized there's a couple of benefits that are almost hidden within it. One, it will greatly increase and help with your ability to learn DAX and understand what DAX is doing. It'll just make you more fluent and make it easier. Kind of like Duolingo for me makes it easier to learn languages or learn something about a language. I really think this DAX Query View will work like that to help explain things. But then as I really worked through this article and this demonstration, I really saw, I was like, wow, I'm going to probably change how I define measures in the future, or I could really see this changing how we make measures in a much more fluid kind of way. So it is really cool. To turn it on, you might not see this yet, but you go under your options, and this was the latest preview features list from this month. You can see Copilot features down here, and I went ahead and turned on the new card and button slicer visuals as well, so I could start using those. But before we kind of show it, it's just helpful, like in case I'm sure you're all familiar with DAX at this point, especially in the main reason that oftentimes we use it as Power BI developers is to define a new measure, define a new column, you use DAX. And sometimes you've probably also defined new tables using DAX. And I think that's a great starting point, because what's common about that in all of those cases is you were using some kind of function to define either what we would call a scalar value. So basically just a number or a piece of text, like just one value is all a scalar means, or a table, or returning a table of something, right? So you might have used DAX to generate a calendar table, or you might have used the DAX shortcut functionality to just like make a real simple table with the two curly braces and a 0 in the middle to make a measures table, something like that. But DAX really is a query language. What the measures and the columns allowed us to do was just kind of, in the context of wherever we are, like give a real short definition that kind of felt like using an Excel formula to say, in this cell, although we know there's not, may not be cells in a column or database, but that I just want, this is my definition. What's really going on all the time inside of Power BI though, is when we're defining those visuals, they are writing a DAX query behind the scenes. And you probably also come across it, maybe if you use the performance optimizer tool, it will show you, hey, here's the DAX query that your visual is generating to talk to the semantic model. So if you're at all familiar with SQL, very similar concept, right? That, hey, I'm going to compose this command that says, here's what I want, and ask the database, and it's going to give me back a rows and columns type of result. So it has features to do those same things, but it's especially suited over like a traditional relational database where you just have like rows stored in tables. To instead, you're querying this semantic model that has columns stored in tables and a whole lot of extra metadata about what things are and how things ought to be aggregated, and the relationships between the tables are much more of a first-class citizen. So it's always DAX going back and forth between the visuals, make a DAX query, they ask the semantic model, and it returns it. And that's why also, if you have a page that has 100 visuals on it, it takes a while to render. It's just literally that process of answering all those queries might take a second. Yeah, quoting Zoe, it's like a SQL query that you can use to view data in your semantic model. That's it. Yeah, so I kind of just put these bullet points here together to make sure I remember to talk about things, but we'll just jump straight into a demo if we can. Once you turn on that feature in your Power BI desktop using the options, you get a fourth view. So this is kind of a big deal. We've only had these 3 views for years, right? There's this fourth view down here called DAX Query View, prominent feature. Just so you know, if you'd like to follow along, we'll jump back to the browser. Sorry, I hope it doesn't create any negative mental effects if I'm switching back and forth sometimes. But we're working off of a sample that you can actually follow along if you want to here. Here we go. And this is the store sales sample. So I'll just drop this right here in the chat. Okay. And yeah, if these, honestly, yeah, another thing that's really opened my eyes to is that I'm not using the samples enough. These are good Power BI models that I can use to demonstrate things and build simple demos off of and things like that. So excited to do that more. So it gives us, some real basic overview pages and things like that. But let's say this was a model that someone else in your company had built, and then they were no longer with the company, or whatever reason they can't just walk you through. Here's how it all works, and here's what's built. It could be helpful to be able to get some summary information, not just about the visuals and what they're trying to tell, but about the data itself, like what's actually in here. Well, using our DAX Query View, we can start to do that. So just giving an overall orientation of what's going on in the DAX Query View, instead of a canvas, we have a query text editor space right here, front and center in the middle. We still get something a lot like our data or fields view over here on the right-hand side, which is great. And then down below, we get a query results view. Some things that, yeah, one thing that confused me off the top was I was looking for tabs across the top just to have different queries. And I forgot in Power BI Desktop, the paradigm is they keep their tabs across the bottom. But they totally do work the same way. You can have multiple queries open with different tabs. They always save when you have to save the whole PBIX file, and they will save with you. And then they can be renamed. So we'll just call this one first query, and so forth as we make more information about it. I noticed that it can't be duplicated, but it's also very easy to just copy and paste text from one to another. So maybe they'll add a duplicate button here in the future. It's really not a big limiter right now if they don't. So what's going on here with this? You may not have, oh good, it even supports Zoom, that's nice. You may have seen the evaluate word before, but you might not have, because what Power BI Desktop is doing is and yeah, thanks for the questions there in the chat. Yeah, and the Zoom, yes, okay, I'm seeing the chat now. You bet, it does need to be a lot bigger. Here we go. I can make it even bigger. Yeah, what Power BI Desktop is doing, when you're defining a measure, you're telling it when this thing gets evaluated, here's the expression I want you to use, right? I mean, that kind of makes sense. So later you drop it into a bar chart and it evaluates with that query, and then it gives you actual results and it knows how to calculate it. Those visuals are generating an evaluate statement, and logically it equates to a select statement a lot, right? I'm going to give semantic model, I'm going to give you a DAX expression, and I would like you to evaluate it and give me the results back. The way I created this one, actually, it was really cool. If you're opening up the DAX view for the first time, it'll just generate this one for you by default. I guess it picks, I don't know how it picks which table to use. Maybe it picks your biggest table, but it just picks a table and says, we're going to evaluate a query, and the table we're going to use a top end function. So that function generates a table. You might have used that before, and it takes 2 arguments saying how many rows do you want and from what table. And so 100 from store, We can hit F5, which I have saved as a shortcut on my keyboard, or you can click this run command. So it says it also works with selection. That's really cool. I actually just read that. But if you want to have several expressions in one row and say, hey, just run this one, then you can do that. Nice. And here's our results. It is nice too. You can also have multiple result sets. So I didn't really expect it to be this fully featured when they launched it, but I'm glad to see that. I could use another evaluate statement, say top in 100, and pick a table from the right-hand side there called item. And it gives me actually two result sets, which is nice. So result 1 and result 2. If there's a way to name these, I don't know what it is, but it's cool that it'll give you multiple result sets. They even give you a copy button to take the results and copy them straight into Excel. So definitely a handy thing for like, oh, just let me sort and filter, and what if I could just get a few rows out of here? I'm sure there's a limit on the number you could pull. I actually haven't experimented with that yet, so I need to go and read the docs a little more carefully to see, like, what if I ask for 1 million rows or more? What would happen? But it gives a great little first example. So there's a simple evaluate statement. It works great. What else could we do? Well, as we work through Zoe's, you know what? Let me also put a link to Zoe's demo. This is really going to help. So that is it. There we go. Yeah, so we can start to do some more things. So we're going to look at like how to use this view to generate some quick overviews of tables. So if we wanted to do that for district, when we're in this view, there's now this like quick queries option here. Very neat. We can say, show me top 100 rows of district. There it's running. Maybe my computer's feeling a little overwhelmed because that seems like a long time for it to run. But interesting. Well, let's see if it comes back. It may not, but while it runs, let's just take a look at the expression it generated. There's our evaluate friend again. Used a different function to make a table this time called select columns, wrapped around a top n. So it'll give you a little preview, like a lot of code editors will, of if I say select columns, what does that mean? I do have a couple of links that I think will be helpful in the slides. So of course, if you start to wonder about what do these, what do these expressions mean? Where can I find documentation on them? First of all, I actually thought that this would do that for me, but anyway, one site I can highly recommend is called DAX.guide, which is produced by the SQL BI team, and you might have come across them. They have a lot of great resources, but they pretty much have all the DAX functions listed out here on the side. And if you're not quite sure what select columns does, you can open up a nicely formatted website to tell you about the arguments and like what it's intended to do and how to use it. So there's some subtle differences between similar functions like summarize and add columns, and some of it is working to figure out which one to use. But they also make they also make a fantastic resource called dax.do, in which you can also there you go, there's a whole video about it. Given this set data model, you can kind of practice creating DAX as well if you'd rather use this to try out, to learn some things and see how functions work. Nice. Let's see here. Okay, so it never is coming back. That's interesting. So I have to say I had not had that happen before, and we'll see. I'm gonna try, I can run this. Okay, yeah, this ran fine. Something about district, perhaps. Let's see if item does any better. Select top 100 rows. Okay, item came back fine. Let's try district again and see if there's something about it. Yeah, something about it. All right, interesting. What I'm going to do is actually say, rather than the top 100 in, I'm just going to like try this instead. Cancel. Okay, good. They have a cancel button. That's not always there. Well, So that's funny. That's something I'll look into and see, like, okay, what causes a top 100 from district to run so poorly? Yeah, I don't know. Oh, thanks, Greg. Yeah, there you go. Greg's providing some helpful information in the chat there as well from this view. One thing about this view too, I didn't set this up, but you can use it on direct query models too. I thought that was really cool. So think in direct query, if you think about, go back to our slide about visuals are querying the semantic model, there's a second step happening when you're doing direct query, right? So your visuals query the semantic model, that translates it into an SQL statement for most sources we're direct querying from. And then that's issued against the relational database server, and then it comes back and gets retranslated and put into the visual. You can use this to query direct query sources as well. I thought that was really neat. All right, let's move on to kind of the next query. So here's a query that, zoom out just a little here. I think we were just kind of demonstrating that after you get that top end query, you also can just limit the columns that come back by either deleting the rows out or commenting them out. There's also a nice familiar, if you're a SQL developer, a nice familiar order by clause down here. So it feels comfortable and normal. They kept the same syntax there. You can order by other things. Yes, we can't. There's not a lot of interactivity yet in the grid results, which probably makes sense. Other than to copy them all out, so that's cool. This query, yeah, so the way we generated this, you could also go, rather than saying, give me a top 100, there's another quick query option to say, show me some column statistics. That was really, it's funny, it says column statistics. I think that also means for table. Yeah, or I'm sorry, for all the columns inside of the table. Yeah, restore table in this case. It generates this DAX expression that will repeat these column statistics over and over. Let's go back to the top of it. Nice little mini map over here too. It's going to union several rows together basically, so one row per column. So for this first one, it's going to say the table is store, the column's location ID. Then it just starts doing some descriptive statistics on it, right? Figuring out the median, max, all that good stuff, but also how many zeros. I don't know why we would need evens and odds, but that's pretty cool. And some quartile type of things. And apparently it knows whether it's a date function or not. So apparently for dates, it can do range in days and things like that. I think this has a date in it. Yeah, open date. Check that out. So here you can see like the min and max for our open date data in here. There we go. Okay, I guess it's telling us how many days are included, how many months and how many years are included in the range. So really helpful statistics that we can generate pretty quickly to give us a sense of, you know, what's going on in this model. So that was by clicking on the table name, saying quick queries, and show column statistics. So you probably already guessed, but you can do that for an individual column as well. So I could pick just location ID. It generates a much shorter query, but just gives me one row with all those stats in it. Really helpful. So I'll go back to my slides. This is why I put those things in slides, to try to remember what all the things to talk about. The data, stats, yes, measures. All right, here's where it got really cool, I thought. So you can see from these icons over on the right that some of these are measures. They're not put into display folders or into a measures table in this model, which is fine. So so here's a measure that does new store. I'm going to go back to our familiar canvas view so that I will kind of start from a point that we're familiar with. What does new stores do? All right, it does a calculate, a count A, so it's going to count store types with a filter expression to only get those whose store type is new store. So here's a fairly, you know, maybe level 2 measure. Besides, we're not just doing the count A. Instead of that, we're doing it with a calculate statement to add a filter expression to just give us the new stores. That's very cool. So all that's fine. Let's kind of see what that looks like in our DAX view. News stories. I can right click on it, and my quick queries look a little different for a measure. I can click evaluate, define and evaluate, and then define with references and evaluate. So let's take those each in turn. So first, if we just click evaluate, what is that going to give us? A very simple query that says evaluate. It uses a summarize columns function, which is a way of grouping. And yeah, basically, if you give it a column name, it's going to group by that column. And then if you give it a measure, it's going to aggregate that measure. And each argument, it gives you a chance to define a name. So you can kind of see it has group by column names. It also lets you filter, but you can basically give these columns their own name. So basically sum all this stuff up or do whatever the measure says if it's not a sum, right? This gave us a nice simple thing called news stores and evaluated news stores. So that's fairly straightforward. What if we said define and evaluate? The cool thing that this is doing is it's using another function, which you may have seen before. It kind of might remind you of the var keyword that we use in measures sometimes, like where we're going to define measures. So it recreates the definition that we saw in the formula window. And the cool thing about this, though, is it sort of creates a temporary definition just for within the scope of this query. So by running this define, yeah, this is a bit spooky, and I'm glad we have been having this conversation in chat about, does this actually change my model? Could I update data? And no, you can't, thankfully, it's read only. And even in this case, if you're redefining these things, you're doing it only for the scope of this query. So we can see the definition of it and then run it here in the same context. Yeah, it's very fast. The cool thing is you can actually temporarily override it. So let's say if I wanted them to say news store 2, I should get nothing, which is what I get, blank, because there are no rows that match that particular filter criteria. We're going to come back and look at this here in a second, but you might be noticing it's starting to give me a couple of suggestions. So they built a technology into this called code lens, and we're going to look at that here in a second. So, all right, I changed it. I did not like the results I got. How could I get away from that? I think I'll just go back and I could delete my query. I might be able to hit control. See what Control Z does. Yeah, okay. Control Z works. Thank goodness. But you could just generate a new query. And I guess I just wanted, let me illustrate that even if we ran this define command, but it did not mess up our actual definition. Yeah, the definition stayed the same. So good. All right. Yeah, one thing you might notice is that it's doing a count A of store type. Store type itself looks like it. Oh, I see. It's not a measure. It's a calculated column. All right, hold on. Let me find one that has sort of a. Okay, that's just a simple one. So count. Yeah. Total stores. This one's probably pretty simple. Yeah, it just does a count A of store number name. Okay. Look at this one. Let's look at our average selling size. So it just does an average. Okay, well, all right. We're going to make our own measure here in a second. And just to try to keep things familiar, let's go back to the canvas view. And let's see, we have stores. We know what our total sales were, right? And we know what our sales per store is. So let's kind of check that out. Oh, actually, it's right up here. Sales. These are all pretty straightforward base measures. There we go. Here's a nice measure that does a couple of things. So here's a gross margin this year %. So our gross margin this year expressed as a percentage. It's awesome. You know, one of the beautiful things about what makes this a semantic model and not just a database is you can stack these measures on top of each other and they get evaluated in the right context when they're asked for. So let's take a look at this thing here in the DAX Query View, gross margin this year percent. All right. It looks, just kind of looking at this, it looks like the paradigm for them was kind of like, I'll put very simple measures in the tables, and then they do have a measures table where they put some of the more sophisticated calculations. So this is our definition for us. Gross margin this year percent and total sales TY. But the question that we often find ourselves asking is like, okay, let's say if this isn't giving us the results we expect, if they were all 0 or something like that, we could kind of dive down into that. Before I do that, it says 42, so 40.42, 42%. Let's split this out by store. Summarize columns makes this pretty easy. The first argument is going to be a name, and the second argument will be a column. It's called name. Second, obviously, I don't know this model as well as I'd like to. Can I drag it in here? Okay. Oh, I'm summarizing, aren't I? Sorry. That's what's happening. I need to give this thing first. Gotcha. Gotcha. Now it's actually doing that gross margin this year percent, and it's breaking it out by store for me. That's just kind of what summarized columns does by default. But let's say I'm going like these numbers don't look right. So that tells me either my gross margin this year is not right, or my my denominator is not right. One of these two things. Notice they use this sign here. They really should have used the divide function, but well, that's okay. We'll let them pass on this one. You can actually see in a tooltip, it's already giving me the preview of what that is. We can also, if you click this was totally working before. They were showing me light bulbs before over off to the side, but let's see. However, let's just go. I think what I needed to say is we define this with references, and this will give me what I want. So gross margin this year percent. This year percent. This is kind of the feature we've been driving toward, is define with references and evaluate. This will actually go ahead and explicitly lay everything out. Let me make you, here's the measure that does gross margin this year, this one that does regular sales dollars, so forth. And so if I feel like, man, something's wrong in my measure, I can break it down into all the ingredients for that measure, the component parts, and start to figure out like, okay, which of these things was not right? Okay, the gross margin this year just does the sum of the gross margin amount where the scenario ID is 1. Well, maybe my scenario ID is wrong, and maybe I need another filter that's more specific if I think that number is too large, right? The cool thing that this is doing too, it's taking those definitions and then laying them all out for you. So it's kind of like in Excel, you could click on a cell and say, show me the precedence and dependence, and just, break it down step by step. And in DAX, it's always been tough to do that because it may be summing up a million, rows quickly. How can I figure out where my problem is? And this is very cool. So let's say we determine that, oh, I see what's going on here. It's my markdown sales dollars. I don't want all markdown sales. Some of these aren't really, they shouldn't count toward our margin. I don't know why, but let's just say they should. And I could say, since I'm not in the middle of a calculate statement, I need to be more specific with this. I want to calculate this. Now give me the sum of the sales markdown dollars. Maybe I just want where these are. Oh, I need to close my sum function. I'm like, this isn't acting the way I thought it would. And you can see the IntelliSense works great. Again, I've been shocked how, let's just say where it was scenario ID equal to. Again, I don't know this model, so this could be totally wrong. This is the total novice coming along and messing this thing up. But I've changed the definition. I've affected my result, and maybe I feel like, yeah, this is right. I've got it now. Yeah, it does look like it actually affects the results. I made it say nothing, so basically I took the markdown sales out of it. And I'll see if I can make this larger. And the answer is I can't. I'm sorry. I'm going to copy these into Excel real quick so you can see them better. Yeah, this is what's going on. There, a little bit, maybe a little bit clearer, just that it's breaking down each part into its component pieces. Okay. I'm very in the lead. Here comes the best part, is that once it realized that I did that, it actually does suggest for me a little action here that says update model, overwrite measure. Now I can actually change the definition of it. Once I feel like I get it right, I can click this and it says, okay, I'm going to actually update the model. So again, it's not going to change your data, but it will update the definition you have in your model of this measure. And it says you can't use Control Z. So, maybe do a save as before you go firing this off. But you click update model, does a little working on it. And we changed markdown sales dollars. So let's find that thing. I notice in the DAX view, we don't get our formula view, and that's okay. I could have hit define on it, right? But I'm going to do it this way since it's more familiar for me right now. Markdown sales dollars now has my calculate statement. That is, there's no reason to believe is correct, but it does have my new logic. So I really like this this type of workflow where I can, it lets me work with measures in a much more natural kind of way. Even more than doing it this way, one thing I might suggest is like, I might just make a measure that, okay, I'll call it sales. Put it in this table, it's fine, but just like, well, it's going to be helpful, especially when I'm doing new ones, right? And I could just call it measure one and try to figure out some stuff. And there you go. It even does an update model, add new measure. I didn't know it was going to do that. Now I know for sure, and I don't think I'm very crazy right now, is that earlier it was giving me some light bulbs like code. There's something called code lens in there. I'll go back to the article and see what step did I skip, because I know that it did this earlier. Code lens, there we go. So basically I guess that's the code lens feature that is detecting that you've made some changes. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'll go highlight a measure and see if I get that light bulb. I'm not seeing any light bulbs right now, but it doesn't matter. You can still get them over here on the right and say define and all that stuff. Okay. All right. So that's mostly what I could see from DAX Query View. And I thought that was a really cool workflow. For those of you who are familiar with it, if you may have been using an external tool called DAX Studio for a while. So it would do a very similar thing. If you installed it, and if you had the settings right in Power BI Desktop, it could open up, it could connect to your model running in memory as though it were a database. I think this is what this would say. Go. And kind of give a very similar type of query experience. And that's great. It had a formatter in it, and you could save queries, and still could be very useful. I think there are also performance data and server timings. It gives you a lot more like kind of a heavy duty optimization tool. So definitely still recommending, to use DAX Studio and get familiar with it. But this is a nice on-ramp into mostly the gap that people weren't ready to jump was kind of like, I don't know how to write. I don't know what to put in the DAX query window, right? Just because they weren't really comfortable using define and evaluate. But once you get there and you start to get more familiar with the table functions, which you probably haven't used as much, unless you've done a lot of iterator functions like SumX, where you needed to give it a table expression. But you can start if you just kind of master select columns, summarize columns, just those two, honestly, you can get a very, very long way in being able to query your DAX models and really become a measure defining ninja, frankly, I think so. There's a good question here from Luke. Can DAX view be used to inspect measures in published semantic models without having to pull down the PBIX file? Luke, it's a great question. I don't know, but I'm going to try to find out. While I do that, does anybody have other questions or comments? So what I'm going to do is a live connection. Let's see how this works for this guy. Or thoughts about how this might be useful for your organization. they still take a while to open. They haven't fixed that feature yet. So what I have here is a downloaded PBIX, but all it has is a live connection. So I hope I'm kind of answering your question here, Luke. One could argue, am I having to pull it down or not? But I haven't pulled down any data, and these files, if you do say, hey, just give me a live connection, it's 180K, so a very, very small, very small expression here, very small file and lightweight. And I don't see the DAX view. So no on the live view. Let me see. Now that they have that Explorer experience in the service, though, I'm kind of wondering if that might be possible. Here, I can say explore this data from the report view. That's cool. I was kind of hoping to see like a DAX view here, and I don't see that here. So, oh no, wait, actually, hold on. Calendar month. It did say once it did a query, somewhere in here, it said I could see the DAX, man. But it's not the full experience. That's safe to say. So I think the answer is no. Add a local model and then try. Oh, okay, good idea. Thanks, Luke. Smart. Now, how do I do that? Just click this. No, I will get some Excel data. I'll go get the Excel file we just downloaded. How about that? Okay. Book 1 in OneDrive. Okay, I'll replace it. Sure, my book 1 was very valuable though. There we go. Add a local model. Okay. Oh, well, maybe I can just say that. Maybe I don't need. No, it's just direct querying. I'm sorry. I need to do the import, but I don't know for sure, Luke. I'll do that real quick and try to find that out. But I certainly hope that you might have some ideas on, before if it was like, well, I don't want to get DAX Studio and write DAX, but this DAX view could be really powerful, especially in complicated models, things you need to get quick summary statistics on or overviews of. Like, could I just see a little bit of the data? I know in the past I've opened up a blank page, do a table visual and start dragging, rows, start dragging columns over there. And all I'm trying to do is understand like what is in this, work, what is in this PBIX file. The DAX Query View, I could really see us, living there a little bit more. To have that and the table view together is just extremely, extremely valuable. So, all right, we have a local model. And as soon as we got that local model, you're right, it popped in. And I believe that these are remote tables. Let's make sure I'm still right. Yeah, they're definitely remote. And I can still do my DAX Query View on that. And I'm assuming the service answered that question because this data does not live in my PBIX file that I downloaded. It only lives in the service. So it did take, you saw it took a couple of more seconds to just get a few. What about column statistics? Yeah, to get a few of the rows out, but it's working. So things are certainly, it's a powerful tool to put in our hands. Yeah, and so Tony mentions, liking the feature just to format DAX code and create unit. Yeah, it does a great job of formatting it, and it looks like it has this button here at the top. So before this was not there's a website called DAX Formatter, and the SQL BI team had been creating things like this. Maybe they borrowed some of their code, I don't know, but this is really handy. So I guess we mess all this up. Control Z for a second. Okay, let's say I accidentally have it unformatted. I can hit format query and it'll make it really nice. Also, you can quickly comment things. That's cool. So Control/, those are, as you get more facile with this, then you can like quickly comment things there. Comment undo, and then the find command. So this is another way too of if you were trying to figure out like what all measures does this depend on. One thing you can also do is say quick queries, define all measures in this table or define all measures in this model. So get definition listed out for everything, and then just do like a find and replace to try to figure out what's going on. So pretty cool. Oh, and so boy, with our remaining time, I was all excited because I finished. I was like, I can't believe I got through the demo. I thought we'd run out of time. That's because I wanted to talk about one other really important release that, again, our girl Zoe is behind. Microsoft didn't used to release all this cool stuff. And for those, I hope you all know this, but she is a graduate of the Oklahoma Power BI user group. She was one of our co-leaders for a while. And now she works for Microsoft. And ever since she got there, they're releasing just killer feature after killer feature. And she's always at the top of it it says product manager. She's a senior product manager now, and she's quickly moving up the ranks, probably gunning for Satya's job at the end of it, frankly. But they released, these functions have existed for a long time. You probably know DAX came out of, I keep saying that, DAX came out of SQL Server Analysis Services. And that came with a lot of built-in metadata functions because it was meant to be an enterprise-grade kind of database. Also, why Microsoft was able to jump into the game and catch up to Tableau, because they had this cool database technology that was pretty mature, ready to go. Well, there's these functions called info, and as you're looking at some of these names, you might notice that they're not so much about the data in your column, in your model, but they're about the metadata, the data about the data inside of your semantic model. So we could start to do some really cool stuff with this. Let's make a new query here. Just pop in the evaluate word, info.columns. So now I can write a query that gives me, as a result, a list of all of the columns in the model. This is really helpful. I could see like saving a script off that was just like, here's my summary, like my summary queries for every new model I interact with. Luke, thank you, Luke, for that emoji. That is the appropriate reaction. Yes. Yeah, and these are kind of like, just kind of subtly like, oh yeah, by the way, now you can do these info queries and they're available inside of Power BI desktop. Yeah, we can start to, okay, show me all my tables. You can see it has pretty technical information because this is the metadata that ties all the information together. So if it was a SQL model, you might be interested in doing some joins and things like that. So, all right, here's a question. And Greg, you probably know this because you're the one who told me about this feature. What if I were to say, I'm going to do select columns? What I don't know is what's the relationships between these tables. Yeah, dependencies. There you go. Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking of. I can't really do a select column because it's not a table. I'm not sure what to put here. So I don't know, Tony, I have to think about that. Could I write one column that kind of put it all together? Like show me the table name and the column name. Like, is there a model behind these? Let me go. I have to say, I read so much about her DAX thing. F5, Control Shift E. Let's just see. Okay. I'm going to steal from her and see what this does. It looks like the answer is yes. Or because you can, you can build your own table. So why do you need to put in a table? What am I thinking? There we go. What does this do? Measures of the table. I can use it. There we go. I don't know. I feel like I copied that out, right? Well, you could do something that I'm sure you could get very creative. You can then see if she's using variables to make tables. I wonder if I need to say define and not first arg is info.columns. Okay. Or is it just angry about this? Can't be used to define a variable. Oh, okay. Well, okay. How about I call it M? There we go. I don't know. M, T, C. There we go. And then I'll just replace them. Okay. Can I do find and replace? Yes. That's Control H, by the way, whenever you're getting into, we're all going to be coders by the end of this. I've just decided. So you might as well just start learning your chords now. And then combined. Nice. All right. How about now? Now we're happy. Yeah, there you go. Also, yeah, in the final select columns. Thank you, sir. Very good. I like it. Coding in front of other people is always very scary. But I'm sure, yeah, you can use somehow you can put things together here. So super helpful. Like I can see having maybe a DAX expression that is a table like stick in every single semantic model that just has, hey, here's a table that has all the information about this model. Yeah, and yeah, and then like you said, there's descriptions and synonyms. We could start trying to figure out so this gives the description, and apparently in this model there is no description, right? Yeah, you could see how this data just becomes extremely useful when you start asking like, what data is in my Power BI service? So if you've had premium, you've actually been able to do this for a while. If you were, willing to kind of connect to the service as a server, run all these queries, collect all the information, but it is very handy to have it just right here in Power BI desktop. And I'm really kind of curious, like how to use it in just I don't know, how to see it used in measures and things like that, or in data visuals, maybe. Yeah, Tony brings up a good point. Again, thanks, Tony, is that if you are wanting to lean on Copilot, like any AI, the more and better data you give it, that's actually what it runs on, right? So if you want to have good Q&A experiences, which we should deep dive into Q&A and Copilot in a future meeting. I'm sure we will. Maybe I'll ask Zoe to help us out with that. And it's only going to be as good as the data it can pull from and the metadata that it has. So definitely going to become more important. And for, I think we've been able to do that. I know you can always do it in the model view. They need to make it a little bit easier, but you can always enter a description on your tables or, yeah. Actually, since these are foreign, I don't know what effect that's going to have, but pretty cool. So I think those are the main things I wanted to make sure to share. The DAX Query View, the info function, it probably I hope it gives you a lot to digest and a lot to kind of think, maybe want to go play with, even ahead of that preview feature being released. I could see that being extremely useful. Paste them. Yeah, she's just going back to the model view and saying enter data and then basically running a query and then pasting it as metadata into her model. So pretty cool. I didn't even get all the way through these articles. Zoe, she basically writes all the best stuff, right? So yeah, other questions, comments about these features that we talked about? Cool. Okay, well, I hope this has been useful. If we just kind of look ahead to our next meetings, like we said, we're trying to get back on a monthly cadence. This is the 4th Thursday, and I have kind of had a conflict sort of coming up with the 3rd Thursday for me personally. Also in February, that'll happen again with some travel, but we'll plan for February 22nd. And I think that calculation groups would make a great topic. We could also talk about Copilot. You know what? How about this? I'm going to AI this. I'm going to do a poll, or I'm going to action item this. We're going to make a poll. We'll send it out to the members and see what you guys choose between calculation groups, Copilot, or the other thing we talked, was data activator. So those are our 3 contenders. Yeah. Yeah, just go back to every report you've ever written and go add descriptions into all of your columns and tables now. Exactly. It's small task. Okay. So yeah, okay. Tony, you kind of talk about Power and Fabric roadmap show for new features. They have been kind of announcing that recently. They'll call them, whenever you see them talk about these waves, their pattern, this is hilarious. I told my wife she loves to work with textiles, and I said, I think I need to go to the Fabric conference this year. And she was like, I want to go to the Fabric conference. I was like, oh yeah, there's going to be a lot of probably disappointed textile artists there. So, but you'll see these release wave plans. Here we go. Whenever you see them talking about these waves, they tend to twice a year, they tend to kind of put out forward-looking statements. And Tony, I don't know, honestly, it's been on my list to come and figure this out myself. I will certainly try to get some information in the show notes or on YouTube or the meeting notes about it. So, but a lot of stuff is the answer. Great. All right. Well, I think if anybody else has anything else, Taguma or Jeremy, anything that you guys would like to share? All right. Okay. Thanks all for being here. Hope you learned some useful stuff, and we'll see you in February.